Welcome into Bucs Insider. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith. It has been a fun week because it is official. Antoine Winfield Jr. is a Buc for a long time and making a big buck.
That's right.
It was quite a deal for him. He had his official signing and press conference this week, and it was even cooler because the press conference was 1 year to the day from him calling his shot. So let's take a listen.
Good work Saturday morning, where everybody hung over. We got that good work here. Big season ahead. I think I'm the only one that see it. But that's just how I gotta be right now. That's how I gotta be.
What are you going for?
I want 10, I want all pro. Pro Bowl, Super Bowl, I want it all.
And the final goal?
Highest paid.
There we go.
Highest paid this year, mark my words. I'm gonna come back to this video and be like, I did it. I probably shed a tear. Because all this work that we put in right now, we're gonna make it happen.
So it's May 20th, 2023.
Power of the tongue. You gotta speak it into existence. All pro, highest pay. All pro, highest pay. All pro, highest pay. And eventually, it's gonna become reality. So, stay tuned.
Incredible. And again, to the day, 1 year from when he recorded that video was his press conference. And when I interviewed him afterward, I was like, I have a list of things I'd like for you to manifest, if you wouldn't mind, winning the lottery, things like that. But I did talk to him a little bit about his next things he wants to manifest. So we have a slice coming out with him soon that's going to be fun to hear that about. So tell me your thoughts on this deal, listening to him at the press conference, just what this means to him, to the organization, and to that defense.
Well, it was funny because he said, as we know, he's now the highest paid defensive back in the league, and he says it there in the video. And the goal, when you say that, obviously, you have to do something extraordinary to then be rewarded as the highest paid player at your position, right? So it's a good goal to have beyond just, wanting to be wealthy. But he said, to be clear, I was going for highest paid safety, not necessarily defensive back. So that was kind of even above and beyond. But again, it's, as was mentioned in the press conference, it's another example of if you're drafted by this team and you put in the work and you become a good player, they want to keep you around. And we're showing it again and again. That's the way that Jason Licht wants to build this team. And Antoine himself, he said he didn't put any numerical goals. Like in that video, I think he said 10, as in 10 takeaways, which if you add up his interceptions and forced fumbles and fumble recoveries, he did get there. But he didn't really have another statistical goal for this season. The goal was the Super Bowl, which is what Jason Licht, who was sitting next to him, wanted to hear. So he wants to get Super Bowl number 2 and then go from there, as he said. And he plans to continue working just as hard. He says every year he wants to be better than the year he was before. And at this stage in his career, that's still quite doable.
Yeah, which is incredible. We're so excited to have him around longer term. Now, that was, of course, the highest profile signing of the week. It wasn't the only signing of the week. We're always kind of in this point, this time of year, of trying to get all those rookies signed on their deals. And so tell us about who was able to get secured. Yeah,
draft pick, third-round pick, Tyke Smith, the safety or defensive back out of Georgia. He got his first deal done like every player picked after the first round. It's a 4-year deal. That leaves just 3 of the draft picks still to go. Graham Barton, the first-round center, Chris Braswell, the second-round outside linebacker, and Jalen McMillan, the third-round receiver. And those will probably get done in the next few weeks. They tend to under the current system because they're just not very difficult to do. And then we also had another little tweak to the roster, signed a defender named Ernest Brown, formerly of the Rams, and then to make a spot for him, released Patrick Laird, who's been on the practice squad for quite some time, the running back. Ernest Brown, he came into the league as a draft pick with the Rams. He was considered an outside linebacker at the time, but he's kind of bulked up to about 300 pounds now from 270. So the Bucs intend to use him like a 3-4 defensive end, like a Will Golston type. So, and as I always mention where these guys played their college ball, he played at Northwestern, because I always mention that.
You always mention it.
No matter what school it is.
No matter what, and not at all more emphasis when it's from Northwestern. I love that. All right, so we don't typically have an injury report at this point in the year. But
I didn't know where you were going with that
I saw your face like, what is happening? Coach Bowles on the injury report at this point. He had a knee surgery coming into OTAs, but that did not keep him from being out there. He was in a golf cart, and I loved watching him ride on by, and as he drove by, I gave a little princess wave, and he gave the princess wave back as he's in his chariot being driven around OTAs. So he's still there, still made it to the first OTAs, just had to get that knee replacement, which, I mean, hey, he's going to be an even better coach this year once you get it all figured out.
Yeah,
right?
we have precedents of coaches going to practice in golf carts.
And it working out okay, yeah.
Something we had seen before. I was kind of impressed, to be honest with you. I had heard some rumblings last week that he may not be at practices this week because the surgery was last Wednesday.
Yeah, that's pretty quick.
And the first practice was Tuesday, so that's 6 days. He said the first 3 days after the surgery were pretty rough, but he was getting around pretty well, and he says by the time the season, I would imagine also training camp comes around, he'll be moving around just fine.
That's
but,
great.
Yeah, it's that's a knee replacement.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
So I personally was impressed that he was out there. I imagine when you think about it, and we could talk a little bit about more what OTAs are, but we only get 10 of them, and so
For sure,
I
he
imagine
didn't want to miss
he
it.
didn't want to miss any.
Yep. So tell us a little bit about that phase we're in, OTAs, what the actual moment
Yeah.
is of the offseason right now.
We just started phase 3, which is going to begin with 3 weeks of OTAs. So you'll have 3 1 week, 3 1 week, and then 4 1 week. The league only allows you to have 10. Sometimes teams maybe skip one of them and only do 9. But for now, we have 10 scheduled. And in this and then after that, there will be a 3-day mini camp, which is the only mandatory part of the off-season program. In this third phase, you can now finally do full team drills like 11 on 11 and 9 on 7 and so on, which you couldn't do until this week started. Offense had to go against like other offensive players pretending to be defense, that kind of thing. But now they can go offense versus defense. There's still no contact. You're not supposed to hit each other, and these are not mandatory. But most of our guys have shown up.
Okay.
Baker Mayfield, very notably, was out there. That's probably the most important person to attend, your starting quarterback, because you're trying to get the offense installed, especially
the rhythm, the timing.
Yeah, and especially once again a new offense.
A new offense,
so
yeah.
it would be unfortunate if Baker wasn't there, but he's there.
And then another person, one of those high-profile people that is attending is Chris Godwin, and we got a chance to hear from him as he spoke about, again, new offense, what his role might look like. So what did you feel like you learned? And I feel like all offseason we've been hearing rumblings of what we think the Chris Godwin-Liam Cohen partnership is going to look like.
Yeah, well, Liam had mentioned that he intended to put Chris back into that role he used to play where he was primarily working out of the slot. And but we hadn't talked to Chris about it. We hadn't really heard how he felt about it, and it was good to hear that he's very much in favor of this. We've shown graphics before about how he was playing like 70 to 75% of his snaps in the slot in the previous 3 years. Last year it was only like 40%. Now he's going to be your primary slot guy again. And a couple things he mentioned. One, as you see here, it allows him to be more creative in his routes, he says. But also, and I thought this was a really good point, if you recall a few years ago, we were raving about how good his run blocking was and how important he was to the rushing attack, which is not real common for a wide receiver. Tight ends, sure, but receivers, they're not usually that important to your rushing attack. They're getting you blocks on the outside in case the run is out and you can maybe get some more yards. Chris notes that when he's playing in the slot, he can go back to being much more involved in the and much more important to the run blocking schemes without it being obvious. If you're playing on the outside, if he's playing on the outside and he motions in and stops right near the end of the line, pretty good indication it's probably a running play and he's going to be blocking. But if he's already there, you're not giving anything away.
Yeah, that's true.
I thought that was a good point.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things I learned last year was talking to Chris on one of our shows, and that he started out as an offensive lineman as a kid because of the weight situation, and I was like, it all makes so much sense now. All right, and so finally, I know tight end room is going to be an interesting one to watch this year that we know we still have, several guys coming back. You have a little bit of additions. And again, in this offense, what do you see as the role of the tight end, how Liam Cohen wants to use them, and therefore what that could look like for the guys that are on this roster?
Well, one thing we've talked about a little bit, I think we're going to run more 11 personnel rather than 12, and 12 is where you get 2 tight ends on the field. So the snaps might be at a bit more of a premium. But Cade told us that he and the other tight ends, it's a really young group, were talking before practice the other day, and they were saying, we want to be the best position unit on this team, which was a lofty goal. I mean, better than the receivers.
I was going to say, I was like, oh boy.
Better than the safeties.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going for that.
But I love the goal.
Yeah.
I love the goal. Heck, if you come even close, you're doing pretty well.
So Cade is the quote-unquote elder statesman of that room, even though he's just going into his 3rd year. We've really totally rebuilt that room. Not that long ago, it was Rob Gronkowski and Cam Brate, and it's really changed quite a bit. As you see here, in the last 3 years, we've spent 4 day 3 picks on the position, and that might be your position group. That might be it right there. I mean, there's a couple of other guys in the mix, but it could end up being those 4, and the oldest one is going into his 3rd year. But there's a lot of different types of guys in that group there, and there's a lot of room for growth. And the funny thing about Cade, I noticed when he was talking to the press, I love the guy.
Oh,
and he gets asked questions that are directly about him, like, what are your goals for this season? How many catches? And he never talks about himself.
Yeah.
He always talks about the position or the team or all the weapons on offense. No matter how the question was phrased, as in like trying to get him to say something good about himself, he was always just talking about the team.
Yes.
Kind of a cool guy in that regard.
He's truly incredible. And I talked to Devin Culp a little bit about him as well,
Yeah,
knowing that they
Washington guys.
played together. And he was like, Cade is just the best human. Like, he's just such a good person and guy. And I mean, you gotta love that. And it's got a middle school sweetheart, and they're about to have their first baby. And
oh,
so
man.
yeah, I mean, Cade's an easy one to root for, 100%. All right, well, that's gonna do it for us on this edition of Bucs Insider. Again, stay tuned to all the coverage of OTAs on Buccaneers.com.